Welcome to the Breaking 90 podcast, where we talk about all things sustainable fat loss. We take people on 90-day journeys to creating fat loss forever. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Breaking 90 podcast. I'm here today with a special co-host, Conor O'Shea. Conor is a co-coach, I guess, if you will, another coach, a peer coach that I've worked with lots in the online space, and helps a different population than most of you listening to this specifically. But I know there's going to be so much value and so many parallels that we're going to be able to draw. So I'm really excited to have him here. Thanks, Conor. Appreciate you doing this for us. How's your day going, man?
Yeah, really good, mate. I really appreciate you having me on first and foremost. And Alex has been mentoring me for like over 2 years. So we have a really tight relationship. He's helped a ton. So yeah, really excited to just share any value I can to your audience today.
Awesome. As you guys can hear from Conor's accent, he's just on the other side of Canada. Where are you currently, Conor?
I'm in Romania, but
Sweet.
from Ireland.
Sweet. And you've been doing quite a bit of traveling, right?
Yeah, yeah. So when we first met in 2020, I was living in Australia, and then I moved. I left Ireland in 2020, or sorry, Australia in 2021. uh, and I had an online business, thankfully, thanks to your help.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was like would have been a very much more difficult situation had that not been the case. And then I went back to Ireland for 4 months, and I just decided in 2022 that I can always come back to Ireland, but I'll just scope out different parts of Europe that are nice, good cost of living, people are friendly, good weather. So all of last year, I just basically traveled around Europe, and Romania was the place that I actually decided upon. And it's awesome. It's very Latin here. It feels like Spain or Italy versus Russia, which I think a lot of people kind of feel it probably you think of Russia when you think of Romania, or at least I did.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly haven't given it that much thought. It's a part of the world that I haven't got to yet explore, but would love to. So I already know as we get going that I want to pick your brain about traveling specifically. But before we do, can you tell people a little bit about who you are, who you help, and what you do in the online space?
Yeah, so I predominantly work with guys over 30 and help them with mobility, with injuries, like the common injury sites like lower back, shoulders, a lot of postural issues. And I got into it because I'm 35 now, and I spent most of my 20s being injured. And I would have been, big into sports growing up. And then just when I was like 21, 22, my body just started kind of breaking down, but falling apart essentially. And then I was working as a coach at that time as well. And just was a lot of anxiety and worry about like I'm in my prime and I feel like I'm falling apart. So like what
Mm-hmm.
am I going to be like in my 30s, 40s, 50s? So I just kind of started learning from people who were older and were in really good shape. And basically now at 35, like I feel much stronger and better and more energetic and mobile than I did at 25. So it's been a big journey, and now I'm just trying to help more people apply the same framework so they don't feel like they're going downhill from their 30s onwards.
That's awesome. I think people listening to this right now are really excited because I know a large part of our population has lived with chronic pain and injuries, and it certainly doesn't get easier as we age. So that's super relevant. Okay, I want to circle back to the traveling component first because this is something that my audience asks all the time, but you did a shitload of traveling over the past 3 years. How did you prioritize your own health and fitness during that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always I mean, it's kind of a little bit unfair in that it's not fair to compare because it's just always front of mind for me because it's my work and I'm just in that mode of training and everything like that. But anywhere I go, I make sure there's good gyms. So I'm not going to go somewhere that there isn't a good gym. Or the upside of the type of training I do, it's minimalistic, mostly body weight training. So you can do it in a room, in a space. So that would be the first thing is like the type of training I do is very accessible, or I'd always make sure that I'm close to a gym so I can do it. And then it's very much like, from a value standpoint, like training for me isn't about really looking good anymore. It's about being able to not be in pain, and really good for mental health. So, if I don't train for like literally 3 weeks, I've got really bad pain and I'm not feeling good mentally, like psychologically. So it's like,
Of course.
that's a really good driver to like keep doing the thing that I know is just going to make everything feel better, basically.
I think that's honestly all of us, right? Even the people who haven't, even the people who haven't spent the amount of time in the fitness industry that you have, I think that it affects them the same. They just might not realize it. Like the connection I draw there is that when you eat like shit all of the time, you don't really feel it when you eat shitty. But when you eat really well all of the time, and then all of a sudden you eat a shitty meal, you really feel it, right? And the same thing to me happens with people who train. When you never exercise, when you don't take care of your body, well, you do a workout, you're sore, you're just really freaking sore at first, and you don't really feel the benefits after one. But when this becomes a regular part of your routine, movement and exercise and taking care of your body, when that break happens, you notice the drastic difference, because you were riding at 80, 90, or 100% typically, and now all of a sudden you're down to 40, which a person whose norm is 40 doesn't feel it. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just
Okay,
you kind of
cool.
you get used to something and it becomes normal. It's the same as like being in pain and being injured. And then that's just your kind of default feeling, like, oh, I just kind of feel terrible. And then you start feeling better and you're like, oh my God, how did I survive feeling that way?
Yeah.
You're like, Jesus Christ. Like,
Yeah. And even like, I've even been here, and I know everybody listening to this has been here, but you get into this really good cycle. You're eating well, you're training well, you're feeling better than you felt in a long time. And I know that feeling where it's like, I never want to lose this. This is what I want for the rest of my life. But inevitably something occurs, something happens that gets you into that downward spiral, and you kind of forget how good it felt when you were at the top, right? Um, why do you think, do you experience that kind of thing with your clients, or not so much?
can you repeat the question?
So that, do you experience those kind of obstacles, I'll say, where a client's really kicking ass doing well, and then event or obstacle occurs and they kind of fall into that downward spiral for a bit?
Definitely. Yeah, it's very much seasonal as well. It's very obvious because I've clients in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere, so it's always very like, people are like, oh, it's summer, oh, it's winter at the same time.
Yep.
So like it's always kind of July, August for the Aussies. They're all dying, and then in kind of this December, January. Well, January is different because people are motivated. I'd say November, December for people like in Europe and the US
Yeah.
and Canada.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's definitely that component of people kind of falling off. But one thing I found that might help people as well is like a lot of the training and nutrition advice is around kind of punishment and restriction.
Yep.
So it's very easy to just get out of the habit of doing something if it's not enjoyable at all. So that's why I find, since I started kind of going down more like a skill based approach with training and with nutrition, then it's just like, it's like playing the guitar, like you're just practicing it and getting better. So like, then you like, so an example would be, before I was a PT, when I was a PT, like in person, I was doing a lot of kind of strength and conditioning with clients. It would be progressive overload. So we would do like, okay, you did 40 kilos last week, let's do 42 and a half or 45 this week. And like, you get results, but it's pretty boring, versus like, okay, we're working on split squats, and then we're working towards a rolling squat and then a pistol squat. And that's where this is going. And people are like, whoa, this is like pretty cool, like, and empowering. Or like, we're working on push-ups or some sort of a crawling position, and then that's actually building a base to do something like a handstand. And then that got people way more bought in to training. And then people were kind of like, you know, a lot of people would be like, were never consistent, and they'd always be like, you know, 3 months on, then a year off, 3 months on, a year off. And then they just started training year round, like every year, because they started seeing like this is fun, and I can see like I'm getting stronger. I can do a chin up now. I can whatever. I can hold my body upside down against the wall, and then they get addicted, which is so cool.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
I think the magic is finding something that you can keep repeating. Then you won't be falling off as often.
I love that. And for everybody listening to this right now, like this is just screaming at me. All of you hyper focused on the scale. This is the exact same thing. When you're hyper focused on that scale and the half pound or half kilogram changes on the scale, that isn't enough to motivate you. When you start focusing on all of these other things that you're accomplishing on that journey, those are the things that are going to keep you going. The exact same things Connor's saying here. Adding a half a kilo to your squat or a couple pounds to your lift, it's good, but it can only hold you for so long. But when you start seeing this apply in different aspects, when you start being able to do more, live better, that's what's going to drive you. Like this is the exact same. Although we work with a different population, these are the same theories that are crossing over.
Yeah, I'd love to just talk about the impact of constraints people can maybe use as well
Sure.
for fat loss.
Yeah.
Because like the scale can be it's a very objective measure, but it fluctuates, like Alex was saying. But also, uh, some people can get stressed from just tracking a lot of stuff based on their personality, or they can get very obsessive about it. So I think a really nice way of looking at things is how you can create environmental constraints. So an example of an environmental constraint would be you don't eat the last 2 hours before bed. Like that's a constraint, because if you, in my experience and working with people for 12 years, the damage is done in those 2 hours. Basically, you're on track for the whole day, and then you're on front of the couch and you consume 2,000 calories like on a Friday night
Yeah.
without even realizing it. So
Yeah.
like that type of stuff can be super helpful. And then also just looking at your sleep and your stress are really big ones as well. And like personal example for me, I was pretty stressed like last year when I was traveling a lot. Uh, and I was also I had done a carnivore diet in 2020 for health issues, and it helped the health issues. But then I had a bit of like a blowback in the opposite direction because it was so restricted. So it's kind of like, yeah, binging food basically. Um, and I was kind of struggling with that because things were very unsettled, like with the travel as well. And then this year, I started dancing, and it just stopped straight away with the dancing, because the dancing, like, it was Latin dancing, like bachata dancing, and it was such a stress reducer. Like
Cool.
I couldn't believe it. And then I was like, oh, that impulse to, to pacify myself with food it's gone, or it's like 80% less. So I think that's a good thing for people to think about as well. Sometimes you can grit your teeth and like you're trying to, track everything, but really if you look at the big rocks that are glaring problems in your life, that like manipulating them is going to have a bigger impact than being hyper focused on tracking your food.
I love that. I love that. And you found something else to fill that void, right? Like
Yeah.
the dancing for you was able to do that. And I mean, obviously on all kinds of different levels, it's a healthy habit, but it's also in line with your health and fitness goals, which is a win-win. If you can find an activity or an activity that you can fill time with, and it's improving your health and fitness, like you're winning on all levels. We talk about it lots with our clients, but making your we call it purposeful movement, or your daily exercise, like if you can compound that with getting outside, family time, and moving, like you're checking off 3 boxes all at the same time, right? Like this is the things that people want to overcomplicate constantly. The population that I work with, Connor, often the goal is just to live longer, better, healthier lives. And for that, I don't believe you need the best fitness program in the world. I don't. I think people need to start making better lifestyle choices, like the sleep and stress you're talking about, and they need to start eating a little bit better, and they need to start moving a little bit more. And so for some people, they love getting in the gym and exercising, and that's great. Other people are like, I freaking hate this. No matter what you do, I don't want to go to a gym. I don't want to exercise. But if we can start doing something like dance or getting out and walking more like that, that can have massive, massive impacts on your life. And I think that's a difficult thing for people to grasp because of what you're talking about earlier. We live in a world of restriction where we think that the extreme is the only way to approach health and fitness.
Yeah, totally, mate. If I think if like there's a girl who goes dancing to the class and she's a therapist, and I was like, you know, if everyone danced, I don't think you'd have a job. She was like laughing because like the impact it has. It's also the community component, like because like there's a loneliness epidemic. This is something I've struggled with over the like when I was in Australia, I struggled with it a lot. And since I've started dancing, like it's not an issue anymore because I'm literally going dancing with people 2, 3, 4 times a week. So I think simple things like something like doing some sort of a community-based activity,
yeah,
like weekly if you could, or as you were saying, at least like layering it in with like family, and then like literally walking more, getting more sleep, drinking more water, and probably eating more protein. And if
yeah,
you did that consistently for a year,
yeah,
you're probably going to get the best results you've ever gotten in your entire life.
agreed. 100% agreed. I don't disagree with any of that. This may be the exact same answer for you, but I'm curious for the people listening to this that have lived a life of maybe not chronic pain, but have lived a life of discomfort. Like, what advice do you have to get started on that road to less pain, less discomfort? Is it the exact same answer? Start doing that stuff that you're talking about, or would you approach that differently?
I think it's like it's an educational thing as well because like you look at injury and pain a lot of the times as a sign of weakness. So a lot of the times you're very weak, you're very compromised because let's just use your feet as an example. So like your feet are wrapped in a leather shoe for 20, 30, 40 years, so it's deformed and weak, and then like if you get a foot issue like a plantar fasciitis or something like that, generally it's because your feet are just really really weak. So it's the same with like a lower back issue. A lot of times your core, your glutes, your back is just extremely weak from just kind of in this relaxed, slumped, seated position for decades. So the first thing is to understand is like for me, I just don't get away with this stuff. So like my father's got loads of joint issues. Arthritis is rampant in my family. So like I need to move. And unfortunately, if you're like me, you just won't get away with it. So just understanding that avoiding stuff will make you weaker and make you even more compromised with pain and injury. So that's the first thing to understand. And then the second thing, yeah, is movement or motion as lotion. So the easiest thing to start with is walking, and just getting your body moving every day. And then if you are in chronic pain, like I talk to so many people, they go to the doctor, guys in their 20s and 30s, here's some muscle relaxants,
Yeah.
and that's it. It's like, all right, so the plan is to take them for the rest of your life. Great. That's going to be really good for your digestion, and just like that's not helping anything. Like
Take
maybe in
take
the initial,
take this medicine and avoid doing the movement that bothered it.
yeah,
Right? Like, how often do we hear that? Take this, don't lift heavy weights anymore.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And for like, if your listeners are women, like just think about how heavy is your kid?
Yeah,
How often are they jumping into your arms? How heavy is the shopping? Well, you should be at least carrying that in the gym or training that. So then at least when you do pick stuff up in the real life, in real world, it's not wrecking your back or destroying your elbows or wrists or whatever. So that's like an important thing as well, as just like a really good question to ask yourself, so what to focus on training wise, is what do you actually want to be able to do. So that will guide your decision around what to do training wise as well. Because if you want to just be able to move better, play with your kids, play with the dogs, whatever, you don't need to go on a powerlifting program. But you probably should do some sort of training that's getting you up and down off the ground. So that's why I think mobility training is such a good intro for a lot of people, because it just sets a really good foundation and opens up, you know, like stiff joints and fixes a lot of issues that people tend to run into.
Cool. I love that. I love that so much. And I agree with you. Most people, getting that extra 5 pounds on a big lift isn't really ever going to matter unless you want to be a competitive lifter. That being said, becoming stronger is going to make your whole life easier. But that doesn't mean you need to max out your lifts where we're exposing ourselves to risk of injury or whatnot. For the average person, it just means that we need to work on this whole approach of making our bodies stronger so that our life can become easier. I love that. I think people are listening to this are going to get a ton of value. I'm really excited to hear the feedback. Okay, I want to be respectful of your time. Any last words of wisdom or anything that you want to add that we haven't had a chance to cover?
I think the big thing is, like, it doesn't matter how late you've left it or how far behind you think you've been or how, you know, frustrated you are, you know, with not following through with your word or whatever. Like, restarting is the biggest thing. And when you do fail, the quicker you restart, the quicker you're going to get your results and maintain them, because the damage is rarely done by one decision. It's by you berating yourself because you messed up at the weekend, and then you can't forgive yourself, and then it's 2-3 months have passed and you're like, oh, what's the point anyway, you know? So just restarting, doing something, going for a walk, make it a really small behavior and make it like so ridiculous. Like, of course I can do that. Of course I can walk to the end of the street. And when your internal dialogue is like, well, that's a waste of time, like, you're starting to retrain the habit of doing some physical activity every week. That's what you're trying to do. And then after a month or two, you just build it up over time. And if possible, get coaching. That's always going to be the fast track approach.
That's huge. I hope that really resonates with people, because I mean, I've preached a lot of this messaging before, but in a different frame. So I think it's helpful to hear it from somebody else. But those are such helpful reminders. Okay, Conor, where, for the people listening to this that want to learn more about you and what you're doing, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, Instagram or Facebook at Conor O'Shea Fit. So CONOROSHEAFIT on Facebook or Instagram.
Sweet. So what I'll do is I'll add that to the show notes so that people can find it easily. And if you guys have questions or you want to learn more about this, reach out to Conor, because I know he'd love to have that conversation with you. That's great. Thanks for being here, Conor. I really appreciate that, man.
Thanks, man. No problem.
All right. Thanks, guys. Wherever you're listening to this, do us a huge favor. Take a screenshot, share it to your Instagram, tag myself and Conor on Instagram so that we know you listen to it. And we appreciate it. And have a great day.